I'm of the opinion any chance you get to record something, you might as well. Like it
Yeah,
never hurts, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I've had some fascinating conversations. I work in education, and there's this guy Kaizen who also works in education, and I had a very interesting conversation with him. Happened to record it, so went great. Anyway, yeah, I think the first question I wanted to ask you is like, a little bit of like an overview of your journey. Where have you been? What did you do, and so on.
Yeah. Well, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 18. The first thing I did was a direct sales agency or direct marketing agency where I just trained sales teams that would go door to door or just go direct to consumer in person. I did that for about a year and a half. We built it to 30 people a few different times. And the way that would work is you'd build your team to where they could self-sustain, and then you'd sell it to whatever corporation needed a team. So T-Mobile or AT&T, whoever. From there, I moved up to Seattle, and I spent about a year just networking really hard, just learning a lot about people, um, and did some unconventional things. And then I travel. So uh, I don't know what Mitchell's told you, but I spent six weeks to 2 months in South America, and then another like 2 months ish in India, and a little bit in Japan. And then when I came back, I did the sign thing and I started working at an angel investment community. I didn't know anything about finance. I could not speak that language. So every time they'd say something I didn't know, some word, I'd just write it down. And I'd go home at night and I'd look it up and write down the definitions until I knew what they were saying. Like I knew the different stages of investing in startups, et cetera. And like I learned a lot from the way investors were asking questions, like they were doing diligence on deals, and I got to sit in those rooms and learn the way they were approaching it, the things that they were looking for. And I just spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs. From there, about 2 months ago, um, I met a guy named Elliot Bisno, who is a pretty successful guy. He does events and experiences. A thing called Summit Series is his company, which he built. And for me, like my strength has always been around people. So uh, I think the greatest investment for anybody is just a good relationship with somebody that can help you, but also somebody that has a shared mission with you. Like in investing, the what get makes you successful is just do you have access to the good deals? That's basically the first thing that you need. So if you have a good relationship with a good venture capitalist or something, you're going to you're going to have a higher chance of success, we'll say, because you'll just have that deal flow. So I'm really interested in experiences and community building, etc. Uh, and for the last 2 months, I've just been traveling and meeting with people that do that kind of thing, from like real estate developers that are building like intentional living communities, or to people that do events and experiences. And I've been just trying to be around long-term people, because all good business that I would be interested in doing is with long-term people, like Simon Sinek's thing of long-term people, long-term games, you know? Um, I also live super below my means. I've lived on like $500 a month for a long while, so I don't need anything from anyone. So I just go hang out and learn and figure out what the next steps are. And that's where I'm at now. I'm traveling.
Super cool. Do you have like a longer term goal that you have in mind that you're working towards, or is it just all coming into place as you're gaining new experiences?
Well, there's three buckets that are important to me, and there are goals in each of those. The three buckets in order of importance are health first, like my own physical health and mental health. The second one is family. It's important to me that I start a family and have kids, etc. And I'd like to be in like a committed relationship. Um, and then the third one is career and business. Um, I also like the specific goal within that is to have a flexible business by the time I'm 30. I'd imagine that would be something in the events or experiences space, just connecting people, um, because that's what I'm good at, and it's the thing that I'm most excited about. But I can't predict the future, so I don't know. That's what I would hope to do, is to be running experiences for people, um, and just connecting people for a living. By the time I'm 30, I'd like to have a family, and the health thing there's not a specific goal because you never achieve success in that. You're just it's an infinite thing that you're always doing. You can never eat enough to never have to eat. You can never work out enough so that you never have to work out again. Um, and success is like that too. So I just enjoy the journey.
Awesome. Yeah, and I also think that, the networking and event space probably works very well for you. I think it plays to your strengths and it is very closely related to what you love doing. I think, if you think about like those three things of, what I'm good at, what the world will pay me for, and what I like doing, I think it just falls straight in the middle for you. So, yeah, I hope, you make a business, a pretty successful business in that. I also wanted to ask you, what made you start traveling in the first place? Like, why did you decide that what I should do is go and live in America for 2 months and then in India and then in Japan? Like, what made that decision?
So I traveled a lot when I was young. My dad would give uh, speeches. Basically, he'd talk about his research that he'd done for the World Health Organization in a bunch of different countries. So I'd already been to like 10-ish countries by the time I was maybe 15 or something. Um, and that was really in contrast to many of the people I grew up with, which was I grew up in Davis, California, which is a very white and Asian upper middle class town. It's a college town, super educated, like they've just gone to a lot of school. So it's a bubble. People, uh, like kids are just bored, and what they do when they're bored is they drink or they party. Um, and there just like wasn't a lot of knowledge of the world. It felt like, or it was just superficial, I guess. And I had always grown up with a little bit different of a childhood than they had, um, but I hadn't experienced other countries like while I was older. I'd only experienced it running around when I was like 12. So when I got to the point where like I had the means to do it and I had the time to do it, because after I ran that business, which was all day, every day, uh, I was given a bunch of time, right? And that space was freed up in my schedule. Um, so then I had a decision to make. I could either wait to fall in love with a girl and then travel, wait to have a bunch of friends and then travel, or I could just book tickets and make it happen. And the people I'd rather be around in my life are people that are action oriented people that just do the thing. So I did the thing. I just booked tickets and made it happen. Um, did you also ask like why I was interested in doing it? Was
Yeah,
that a part of the question?
yeah,
Um, the other reason why I traveled outside of just I want to be an action oriented person and I'm interested in doing it is I think perspective is one of the most valuable things that you could have. Like the greatest teams in the world are a bunch of different people, which means they attack all the problem they're solving in a bunch of different ways.
yeah.
And so the more that I can be around diverse people, people different from me, uh, the better I will solve problems. The more information I will have to make the best decision towards things. I also, quite frankly, don't want to be an ignorant American, uh, as many of us are. So uh, the more difference I can be around, the better. And Japan is super different from the U.S. India is very different in many ways. South America, less so, at least where I was, but still, you can find unique people. And so that's why I was also traveled.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think then a follow-up to that would be, when you were traveling, what were some of your best experiences? Like, when did you while you were traveling, when did you think that, man, I'm so glad that I chose to start traveling and that I'm here right now? So what were some of your best experiences? What were some of the let's say, more interesting stories or more interesting places that you've seen and so on?
Yeah. Um, it will always be around people for me. The first thing my mind goes to was when I was in Ecuador, I went to the jungle, um, deep in the jungle, and uh, I spent a day with the leader of a tribe of like 300 people. She's 94. She farms every day. She like cuts down trees with a machete. Her husband was out fishing all day. He's 105. Um,
Sorry to interrupt. How did that meeting happen? Like, is that just something you are allowed to do, or you need special permissions? Like, how did that come about?
I was trying to figure out something fun to do, and the choice is like there's many things to do in Ecuador, but the two big things are like the Galapagos, which are these beautiful tropical islands, and then there's the jungle. And I didn't go to vacation, so I went to the jungle. 10-hour bus ride through the night, another 4 hours by boat to where we were sleeping, and uh, it was still like nice. Like we had beds and like huts and stuff. We were just on the ground, like camping. But
This is something that a lot of people do. Like, it's common. You can just do that, like go to a jungle and be with the tribe leader.
uh, the time I got to spend with her was unique. But you can go like meet her briefly,
Got it.
um, reasonably easy. Like probably like 10% of the world or less, probably less will ever do that.
Mhm.
But I just like I have a way of getting in places and talking to people I'm interested in. Uh, so when we went to the village, I speak Spanish. um, I was and I grew up on an orchard, and so while most of the tourists will say were just doing their thing and adventuring and like eating food, I was spending time with her and asking her questions and just learning from her and farming with her. Um, I think yeah, it's just I don't take like when I take vacation, there's a few different schools of thought around vacation, right? Some people go and everything turns off, they rest. And vacation for me is like a place to push myself physically super hard and to just push super hard without having the worry of money.
Yeah.
Like not pushing super hard in the career sphere, but pushing super hard in the self development sphere. Um, and this woman was the calmest, one of the calmest people I've ever met. Probably her and maybe one other person were as calm as as anybody I've ever met, and I just wanted to learn from her for that reason. She lived a much different life than me. I'm this quick, crazy kid with like nice sweaters and running around like with shoes, and she's barefoot in the jungle. Um, and so this goes back to my value around diversity, around different people. There are certainly lessons she's learned that I could learn. Uh, and so I'd like to do that. So I spent a day just asking her questions. Um, the first piece of advice she gave me ever was just don't drink or party, which I already had never done. Uh, but that just like reinforced that idea for me.
Have you done that since?
No, no, I've never drank or smoked or anything. I don't know, like the whole partying world is not for me. It takes my energy. Um, and I think people should go do the things that give them energy and cut out the things that take their energy. Because I have infinite energy now. Everything I do gives me energy. I get to bed with more energy than I woke up with, and I already wake up with a lot of energy, right? Um, so that was the first advice: is just don't drink. The second thing was around approaching and spending time with elders. She said in all the time that she had been there and there had been people coming through her village, I was one of the first people to ever come up to her and talk to her and just ask her questions, uh, which speaks to the attitude generally around young people is that uh, they're curious maybe, but they're curious around like the 40-year-olds with nice sports cars.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so much value in the older people. Like at least in the US, I don't know the statistics for the whole world, but like most of the capital, most of the money, most of the success all of the life knowledge is with people of 65 and older. You know, like there's billions of terabytes of knowledge in their brains. There's so much information, and when these people begin dying, which is going to start happening soon, we're going to lose a whole lot of knowledge. So there's a lot you can learn from elders, and she encouraged me to keep doing what I was doing of approaching elders and learning from them. So that's one of the highlights, we'll say, of my trip. I really enjoyed that. Um, I guess we'll jump to the end of the trip now. There's many things I learned, but the second thing I'd mention is when I was in Japan, uh, I was with another older gentleman, and we were talking just about like histories. The history of my country, of America, is 230 years old ish, right? Japan has been around for like 1,500 years, so much longer. And I think there's a lot of things that America can learn from Japan, uh, especially in terms of culture. Like I was talking with my friend Parker earlier today, the guy I'm staying with here in North Carolina. Uh, there's a lot of mixed economies already, right? Around socialism and capitalism, they're kind of combined. Everything's a mixed economy now. I imagine the next evolution of society to be mixed cultures, because the best teams are different. So if we take the like social etiquette of the Japanese, and we take the ambitiousness of Americans, and we take the work ethic of different cultures, then and we put that together into a culture that appreciates difference but is also respectful of one another, I imagine that to be a hugely powerful society, because
Well,
there are things that are helpful. Like there are pros and cons to every culture, you know. Um, the problem is that humans naturally tend to separate, to segregate themselves, and so in order to have this, you have to change people's brains from when they're young to
yeah.
appreciate difference. You know.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. I mean, wouldn't you say that culture works differently from, economic practices in the sense that you cannot really synthesize a new culture by, you know, combining a few different ones? Because I think culture is much more a part of your identity than, say, a system of economics is. Like a system of economics is determined by the government, but then culture is something you grow up with, as a child. And then to create a culture that's like the best of a few different worlds, I think that's just a little more difficult to implement. Wouldn't that be true, or are you thinking about it differently?
I'm a believer that there are no limits aside from perceptions. Uh,
Hmm.
I personally have built cultures with my sales teams to appreciate difference. So that's a small scale, right? That's like three of us building a sales office to 30 people is a lot different than changing the culture of an entire country. Way different, way different. With that being said, uh, I think there's like logic to it. Like
Yeah,
it makes sense from a performance perspective to have difference around
yeah,
you. And so uh, I think it's possible. I don't, a part like difficulty is not really a part of my decision making criteria. So it's hard for me to say, yeah, it would be difficult or wouldn't, because it just doesn't matter to me. Like, I
love
think
it.
this is the best thing. I think that it makes everybody's lives better. Uh, and so I think it's possible. And that's the important thing.
I really like that line. The difficulty is not a part of my decision-making criteria. I'm taking a few notes as you speak, and this is one of the things that I'm writing down. Um, Awesome, dude. One of the things I was also interested in knowing, and this is not something that I have written down in my list of questions, but I noticed that you also spent some time in India, and I'm Indian. I have spent my whole life here. I've traveled around a bit, but I haven't like lived in other countries as of yet. So, and I know that the American culture is quite different, and that you're quite literally around the world, like just the opposite end of the world from us. So I was interested to know, what your experience was like here, and what were some of the differences that you noticed, and some of the things that we could learn from each other, and so on.
Yeah. So I flew into Delhi, and then I went north. So I was in Dharamshala most of the time,
Nice.
Uttar Pradesh.
Yeah.
And then I visited Amritsar for a little bit, and of course Agra. You got to see the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
And I'm a mountain guy. I grew up like around the mountains. I grew up in a really flat place, but we would go to the mountains a lot. So in the Himalayas is like amazing for me. Um, I really liked the culture, quite honestly. People are super kind. The salesmen on the streets are hungry, and I like that. I'm a hungry guy too. I did the same thing in the U.S. Um, I think that one of the strengths of of the culture in India that I notice as like a white dude is that how curious people are just to learn about me, which goes back to what I was talking about. It's one of the things that's most important to me in people is that their curiosity, because that makes you inevitable. If you're curious, it means you'll get better, and if you get better, it means whatever goal you have is inevitable. Given two things: one, you continue getting better, and two, you don't quit. That's all you need. So uh, the curiosity to learn about me and my life um, was there. The hunger was there, which I loved, and I think it's reflecting honestly
I think you're breaking off a
the
bit.
startup world. There's a lot of
I'm
success.
sorry. Um, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
I can hear you. Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah, I think there was a I lost you for a second there. Um, I
I
I
see.
I caught you until you said that people were curious about your journey, and that as long as you're curious and you keep getting better and you don't quit, you can achieve anything.
Here we go. I just went on my cell service instead.
Cool.
Does that work?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
I heard until you said that as long as you're curious and you keep getting better and you don't quit, you can achieve anything.
Yeah. So you guys have curiosity, you guys have hunger, and I think that's reflected in your startup world. Um, I mean, there's so many things saying India's next, they're next up. And I believe that. I think you guys are hungry and curious. Um, I think, quite honestly, the biggest difference that I saw in India was not actually like culture wise, but more just infrastructure wise. Um, it's actually one of the like problems that I was trying to figure out to solve as just a business idea, something that I'd like to fix, which is there's not like trash disposal, especially in really rural places where I was. Um, and infrastructure is not as built out as America. And the way I've seen that reflected in your culture is people are more scrappy. Like there's more creative solutions to things in India because there's less infrastructure, so you have to kind of create it yourself or solve the problem. Um, and that lacks more in the US because people don't have to creatively problem solve how to dispose of their trash properly or get clean water or uh, deal with like a flood because that doesn't happen, right? That's probably the biggest difference I'd say is just infrastructure is way different.
Understood. And I don't know if this is the right question to ask, but do you think that there are things that the Indians should learn from the American culture or the American way of thinking, of doing work, of living, um, anything like that?
Hmm. I like hard questions like this. Um, the I'm hesitant to answer this because to say that I think there's something you guys should learn is to say that you guys should live more like me, which uh, goes against my value of diversity. Um, I would love to see better infrastructure in India, though, for trash and recycling. Um,
Hmm.
I see no downside of that. Uh, it betters the world. It makes everybody's drinking water cleaner. It makes your country's beauty stand out more because there is less trash around. Um, and I think quite honestly, it could set a really good example for many other countries in the world, um, to help. Like, if somebody figures out a good solution for that in India, then it's replicable in many other countries. So I see no downside. I think that, I mean, downside, like you could lose money trying to solve problems, but I don't see that as like a downside overall. I think
Yeah,
it's a long-term gain for humanity to solve that problem.
yeah. No, that makes sense. I think that kind of ends the, the first part of my sort of questionnaire about, learning about your journey. But before I end that, I should just ask, do you think there are questions that I should ask? There are there things that I'm missing out on about learning about your journey before we move on to, advice you could give to me or somebody else?
Without knowing where you're headed, it is
Sure.
difficult for me to say you should ask me a certain question.
Hmm.
But as soon as I know more about you, I will absolutely share things that I think might be valuable to you.
Awesome.
So I'd love to hear about what your compass is. Like, where are you headed? What's your goal? What do you want? And then, like, are there what are the questions that you're asking yourself or wrestling with right now?
Yeah. No, that's great. Um, I think so. A little bit of background for me is that I've been working in marketing and specifically in alternative education marketing for
Mm-hmm.
some time, and I think that alternative education is something I'd like to work on in the long run. Um, but I also like to really, explore the world, meet new people, and understand different perspectives and ideas. And what has happened is there's this weird dichotomy of, I think, so my parents, that's my brother and my father, they've always lived this extremely structured one-track life. Um, well, I say always, but for a long time, they've lived this, one job where you stick for like decades and so on. But they've developed this real like passion to take risk and learn and explore. So they were kind of the ones who told me to go to practice in the first place, and they are the ones who are now encouraging the idea for me to go travel the world. So they've like lived this really one-track life, and they have now sort of moved on to exploration and taking risks and learning about the world, and they're trying to impart that onto me. Whereas I didn't go to college, which is, it's somewhat of a risk in America, and it's a significantly more big risk in India. And I've been, living the Praxian life, and I, for some reason, I have like lower risk tolerance, right? Like when I look at things, I'm now trying to think about how do I secure my financial future and how do I remain debt free and how do I ensure that, I always have enough money and so on. So there's this like fight that not exactly fight, but there's this conflict between do I go for like discipline and security or do I go for, exploration and finding out what's there out in the world and so on. Um, what I am going to do in a few days is I'm going to travel across country to Dehradun, to Uttarakhand actually, near about where you were. There's this school, an alternative school, a non-profit school where I will be staying. I joined them as the head of operations. So I'll be working with the founder of the school hands-on, learning about how he's running his thing and managing their operations. I think that will give me a lot of perspective. But the other thing that we are considering is that I should go on like a world tour, similar to what you did. Um, Go explore different countries. And the conflict then again becomes I am thinking that if I go somewhere, I go there to like look for this one specific job and like go with this one very specific goal in mind, and that is to secure my financial future. Whereas my parents think that I should go there with my mind open, that I should just go and meet people and see where that leads, and just just explore and don't go there with like just one thing in mind. So that's like a bit of my background, and then I have like a list of questions, but if you have some initial thoughts, I'd be happy to listen to them.
Yeah. Here's my initial thoughts. One, I think it's great that you're going to go be head of operations under this guy. I think you'll learn a lot, given he's. I would imagine you've made like you've done research on him to make sure
Yeah.
he's a good guy to learn from, which means I'm excited for you, because I think that will be good and you'll learn a lot. My views on traveling are this: um, we've got about 4,000 weeks total in our life, given we live to about 80. 4,000 weeks. That's all we get. Um, I'm 22, So I've already used more than 1,000 of my weeks. So I'm at like 2,700 weeks, we'll say, or something like that. Um, that's all I've got left is about 2,700 weeks. 3,700 if I live till 100, which is my plan. Um, hard to guarantee that, but I've got about 3,700 weeks left. Um, that's why I have three buckets that are important to me, and I'm only focused on those things. Um, Traveling is like a side benefit to me. Like it's cool, it's interesting. Um, but unless you're traveling for a specific purpose, quite honestly, I wouldn't recommend it, especially because my exchange rate as an American is like I've got some leverage, you know. Uh, the Indian rupees are like it will be more expensive relatively for you to travel. So I think like one of the greatest advices given to me was go be where the action is. So if the action is in India and you see a lot of cool startup stuff happening there that you're interested in around alternative education, then go be there. And I don't think it's worth traveling because unless like traveling is like a the way I viewed it is like if I just travel and like go adventure, then I'm just doing it for me, and I'd rather live my life for other people. Now, if your internal philosophies are different, and it's important for you to do the things you're interested in, then definitely travel. Um, my point is, uh, we don't have very much time on this planet. We have such a short life span, so I would be really intentional with the things that you're focusing on. And for me, although I'd love to travel or I'd love to go be a professional athlete or do things that like are just interesting to me, I didn't think those things would make the impact on the world or help me make the impact on the world uh, that I want to. And so I'd rather spend my time other ways. The other half of this is when I was traveling, I met people that do just travel. Like they have everywhere you could possibly think of, they have a picture of themselves there. Um, that helped me realize like I could I could spend my time doing so many different things, and what gives my life purpose is trying to make the world a better place, and me just traveling because I'm interested in doing that does not help me towards that at all. Um, but I'm really intense about that thing. If you're just interested in traveling and you want to do it, um, I wouldn't like knock you for it. It just depends on how intense you're going to be with yourself about that. Um, that's my perspective on that. I'm super intentional with my time.
Got it. It's great advice. One, I think this segues nicely to like this one of these questions I'd written, which is, um, how should I decide if I were to travel, how should I decide where I should go, and um, so I think the reason it follows nicely is because the sentence you said, go where the action is. How do I understand, what the action is and where it's at? Like, what are some of the criteria that you'd use to determine, this is where I should be right now?
Yeah, I think you figure out what like compass you're using, like where your north is, uh, as a metaphor. My north was doing things that give me energy, um, and figuring out like the question of what do I want to do with my life. And through my travels, what I realized is to figure out what you want to do with your life. You just try a bunch of things, just do everything that you were mildly interested in. Um, and eventually you realize the question is not what do I do with my life, but rather what do I do next? And if you just keep doing what's next and you just check those things off and you just what's next, what's next, eventually you find something that sticks, something that um, you're interested in doing that gives you energy, that is also making the world a better place. Uh, to decide where to travel, um, the first thing that comes to mind is find whatever the opposite of your culture and country is and go there, because it will stretch your brain to understand what's possible. And that's all trying new things is just stretching your brain to figure out what's possible. And eventually you stretch it to the point where there is no limits, just like whatever you want and can possibly conceive is possible. Um, the other thing that I would do is read. There's a book called 4,000 Weeks I read after my travels, but it explains this uh, idea of using your time intentionally. It's also where the statistic of if you live to 80, it's about 4,000 weeks. Um, it talks about using your time intentionally. So I'd read that book, and then I'd figure out if you still want to travel, I'd figure out whatever the opposite possible country is from where you live and go there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. Um, One of the other things that I think you're very good at is that you're really good at meeting new people and then forming relationships with them, like making connections, finding ways to be helpful, just making a relationship with new people, right? So I wanted to get some advice on that. Like, how should I meet interesting new people? How should I cultivate relationships with these new people? How should I make them feel like this is a valuable relationship for them? Um, so yeah, so maybe this is like just too large a question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a few different like pieces to it. In no particular order, here they are. The first thing that comes to mind is don't pedestal anyone. What I mean by that is uh, there are plenty of ridiculously wealthy people and successful people and interesting people. Do not put anybody on a pedestal. Do not think you're different from them or like I don't get nervous when I meet anybody ever. Like you could put any celebrity in front of me and they're just people to me. Um, so do not pedestal people. Do not put them above you or like separate yourself from them. Um, like the greatest analogy, like visual, I can give to this is like concerts where there's a celebrity artist on stage and everyone's like in the crowd, like up at them, like celebrating them, basically. Don't do that. They're just people. Don't be a fan. Be a person. The second thing that comes to mind is as soon as you think any praise of anybody, give it to them. If you think of somebody and you're like, oh, that person's awesome, just text them. Just let them know. Give praise freely and as much as you can, but it has to be authentic. So as soon as you think it, give it. Don't make it up. Um, the other, maybe third part to round this out, um, is a lesson uh, that was best articulated by a guy I know named Alex Benayan. He wrote a good book called The Third Door. And Alex said, uh, greet strangers like they're a friend you haven't seen in 20 years or however old you are. So I'm 22. This is just a person I haven't seen in 22 years. And I'm the most excited and like full of love to meet this person and learn about them. And every stranger should be that. Um, if you see they need help carrying their bags, carry their bags. If there's a door, hold it for them. That person is a person that you have not met in your entire life, but they are a friend, and treat them that way. And that's the three things I would add. I mean, yeah, relationships happen through authenticity. So just be you.
Awesome. Um, and do you know who Hannah Frankman is by any chance?
I've heard of her. I believe she's a Praxian, but I haven't actually had a conversation with her.
She used to be the program designer. She designed the program before the current program. It's the one that I studied when I. When did you graduate, by the way?
From Praxis, you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I didn't. I haven't.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, I've been hanging out with Mitchell and meeting with him, but I found Praxis later than many of you did. So I'd already run a business and done a bunch of things.
Interesting.
Um, so it's more valuable to me to be around young people that are hungry. Um, and like the actual knowledge from the course, most of it I just learned through slamming my face into whatever problem I had.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, super cool. Anyway, the reason I bring her up is that she's just one of the mentors that I respect a lot, and um,
Mm.
on her birthday, I think her 25th or 6th birthday, I asked for like, the greatest learnings from her life. And one of the things was the same. It's the don't pedestal anyone. So isn't the first time I've heard that one. And I think it's something that I have struggled with. I'm not particularly good at that. Like when I like someone, I kind of become a fan. And I think when you become a fan, you can't be a friend anymore. Um, it can be, one of two things. So heard that one
I
before.
think
And yeah, go ahead.
exposure therapy is the best solution to that. Like when I started this job in this finance thing, hearing big numbers of lots of money made me nervous or like apprehensive or whatever word I could use to describe that. But now I've had, you know, thousands of conversations with people that are successful. So now it just doesn't, like, kindness is more impressive to me than you having money.
Yeah.
Um, and that happened because I've just talked to so many people, or like celebrities too. Like eventually you just realize they're people. And at that point, it doesn't like, it doesn't impress you that they are like they have fans or are a celebrity or have a lot of money. Um, what does impress me is kindness, um, because that's few and far between. People that really deeply care for strangers. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, so here's some unsolicited advice for you. Uh, the only way to realize that, like, to not pedestal people is to realize they're human, like to organically feel that in you, right? Like I said, be authentic. Um, in order to be authentic and make decisions like loving people, you have to actually love them. So in order to not pedestal people, you have to actually realize they're just human. And one of the best ways to do that is just meet them. Just go spend time with successful people. Um, and there's a bunch of different ways that you could do that, conventionally or unconventionally. Um, yeah, I just have a lot of conversations with people. So now it's people are just people.
What are some ways to, meet and interact with people? Well, successful people, let's say.
Sorry, there's a very loud truck. Um,
No
one
worries.
more time.
I was just asking, what are some of these ways you'd use to meet with successful people and hang out with them?
One of the first things I did is there's a lot of professional athletes here in the U.S. that make um, way above the average income, and often they will form foundations, which is basically like a fund that then gives money out to nonprofits, and to help solve whatever problem that athlete or celebrity is passionate about. In order to raise money for those foundations, they will have auctions, like nonprofit auctions. So you can volunteer to help at that auction to help out the nonprofits. And then also, side benefit, there's a bunch of successful people that donate money at these events. So you can network there. That's one of the first things I did. One of the other things I did is I'd take extra food from a restaurant like business. They would put it by the dumpster for me instead of throwing it away, and I'd take it and give it away to people on the street just as a way of meeting people.
Hmm.
I did that private airport thing where I stood in front of it with a sign. Um, and more specifically, like if you're trying to meet one certain person, I'd read the book The Third Door, because that talks about a bunch of unconventional ways to, like, you can cold email people or cold call them. You can Venmo somebody 2 cents and say, just ask for their 2 cents on something. Uh, there's, yeah, I mean, there's a million ways to get in front of people or just talk to people. Um, Cold email is like super good. Um, the problem is that there are so many emails in the world. So yours has to be really good, which means It has to come from an authentic place of you know a lot about this person, you've done your research, and you send a really tailored, short, snappy cold email that works. Like one of the ones I sent recently, the subject line was "Want some chicken wings," because this guy loves chicken wings and he was a chef.
Nice. Nice.
Um, but you have to be unconventional. You have to take a medium that everyone else is not taking. Like handwritten letters are big for me
Yeah.
because nobody's going to take the time to write me a letter, and also nobody's going to take the time to write other people a letter. So if I write them a letter and I say, "Hey, last year I met you, we had this conversation, and I was super grateful for it. So I just wanted to write you a letter to say thank you. This is the way that lesson is played in my life in this last year." Um, they probably have never received a letter like that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a million ways to do it. I'd read the book The Third Door, and then just do whatever you can, or whatever it is. There's no shame in trying to meet cool people. The difference is when you're a fan or you're just treating them as normal.
Yeah. So this is really cool advice actually. Um, yeah, I'm definitely reading The Third Door, and then I've taken notes of everything else you've said. Um, I think this
The
kind
other
of
book I would
covers.
read is 4,000 Weeks. I'd put
Yeah,
that on your
that's
list too.
it's already there. Um,
Amazing.
awesome. Yeah, I think that covers all of the questions I had listed. I have one follow-up question to the last thing you said, and then, you know, then the two branching questions are A, do you think there are other things that I should ask you? And B, are there things that you want to ask me? But the last thing I wanted to ask from your answer was that were you ever scared when you held up that sign at the airport, take me with you? Were you ever scared what's going to happen or, anything like that?
No, I think the more ridiculous a thing is, the more likely you are to fail. So at least for me, it's like easier to do something that crazy, or probably whatever is more crazy than it is to do a more reasonable thing, because the expectation of failure is different. I expect to fail. Like I expect not to meet anybody with a private jet and just look like a crazy dude on the corner with a sign, you know? Uh,
Well, not so
so
much
no.
the fear of failure. Like, did you ever fear your safety? Like,
Oh,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I've lived a lot of life. Um, so I feel comfortable in weird situations, but
okay,
quite honestly, and this is a part like of who I view myself to be, I perform better in crazier situations. So, like, there's a story of David Goggins that I relate to well, which is Jesse Itzler, and successful business guy, ultra runner, lived or had David Goggins live with him, and they were on a run in Central Park, and there was a dog barking, and David Goggins was like, "Please, please come try me, please." Right? Like he was hoping the dog would come. That's the way I operate too. Like I wish somebody would try something, because like I've given myself evidence that I can handle myself. Um, and I mean, like my life's easier if they don't, but I feel prepared. I've lived life. I've shown myself that I am who I say I am, you know? Um, so I'm not scared of failure. I don't care what other people think. Um, and in terms of safety, especially on like a public sidewalk in Seattle, I'm likely fine, you know? There's been some other sketchy situations in other countries, but uh, the more you put yourself in situations where you have to figure out things instead of asking for help, the more confidence you have that everything is figure outable.
yeah,
Everything. There's not any situation you could put me in where I don't believe I could probably figure it out.
makes sense. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, then the two questions. Is there anything else that I should ask you? And is there anything that you want to ask me?
Yeah, I can ask you questions forever. Um, the the first thing that comes to mind in terms of what maybe a question I didn't answer, which is where to figure out where the action is. or like how to figure out where the action is. Um, I answered a little bit about where to travel. Just go the opposite of where you are. But
Yeah.
in terms of figuring out where the action is, um, there's a few different things I would look at. Figure out what your compass is, right? So for you, it's alternative education, which is amazing because I believe in that. I think also it's one of the pillars of a society is the way people are educated. Um, I would figure out where the most alternative education communities are and plug into all of those through the internet. Um, I'd figure out if there's a city or a place somewhere in the world where there's a lot of alternative education, uh, like education happening, like startups or investment in that. There's definitely alternative education like incubators and accelerators, or like ed tech accelerators and incubators, and I'd plug into all of those, because the more you plug into the like community, the more they'll show you where the action is. Like with Praxis, right? I plugged into there and I knew there was a trip because I was plugged in and I was talking to everybody. Like the first thing I did when I got into Praxis was I asked for a list of like as many people as Mitchell could give me to talk to.
Hmm.
And every person I talked to, I asked for other people to talk to. And so immediately I knew where the action was, what's happening, what trips are happening. Uh, and I got to go on those for that reason. So if you're interested in alternative education, uh, plug into every community you can possibly find, talk to everybody, cold email people, and you'll figure out where the action is because people will say, hey, there's this thing that's happening, you should come. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that's when you should travel.
Yeah.
Um, Probably the first question, the question I almost always end all my calls with, I got to go in a second anyway, is what can I be thinking about or doing for you? What do you need? Um, Sometimes it's good just to talk to people, and maybe that's what you're doing. But is there a certain thing that you are looking for advice on? I'd imagine traveling was one of those, but is there anything else that I could possibly help with or be thinking about for you?
Not so much right now. I mean, I'd like to meet you in person someday. So if you're ever in the vicinity somewhere in Asia, let me know and
Are you
maybe, yeah.
Southern India?
No, I live in Kolkata right now in East India.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, but I'll be shifting to Dehradun, which is near Delhi, in a few weeks, I think. But I'm
Okay.
fairly open to travel near abouts Asia or Middle East or Africa, somewhere in that vicinity. So let's try to meet up in person sometime. And also, I'd like to keep in touch. I think you're really interesting, and I think you're doing some amazing stuff. So I'd like to keep in touch and learn from you as you undertake your journey. Um, Apart from that, I wanted to thank you for you've already given me a lot of advice. This is one of the things that I wanted from you was advice, and you've already given quite a lot of that. So thank you for that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of it. And I think I'd like to return the same question to you. If there's anything that you ever need from me, you just have to ask.
I appreciate that. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else possibly I could give to you that might be valuable. No, I guess here's what it is. I'd imagine you are in the market for a mentor where that's helpful. Do you have a mentor already in the alternative education space, or will this CEO of this company probably become that? Is that
Yeah,
likely what will happen?
yeah, I'd suppose so. I mean, there isn't anything official, but that's kind of the relationship that we'll have there.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Here's advice given to me, that I'll give to you, which is, uh, with successful people, with like people that it's worth being mentored by, the way that you continue a relationship with them is you write down everything that's possibly actionable that they give you, and you do it as soon as possible, and then you follow up with them about that thing and ask them another question. Does that make sense?
yep, yeah,
So, as an example, not that you're looking for a mentor in me, but one of the things I said is 4,000 Weeks. The other one is The Third
Yeah.
Door. So you could read both those books. Um, and then like also there's a couple other things I said, like figuring out where the action is, like connecting with these people.
Yeah.
So the way that you would do this with a mentor is you'd follow up, you'd say, hey, I did all of these things that you talked about. I also did this thing and this thing. And I'd love your advice on this next question that I have.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get some, just like in conversation, normal conversation with this guy that you're going to start working with. He's going to say different things, right? Or he's just going to mention a book that was important to him and not tell you to read it. Read the book and then say, hey, I read that book that you talked about. It was great. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah. It's
people respond to results. And so
yeah.
they often won't directly say, do this thing. Um, but they're going to talk about something. Uh, and you should, like, the best option for you is to write it down and do the thing as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Uh, and follow up with them. And then eventually that builds trust of like, hey, this kid is hungry and he's doing what I ask and what I don't ask. Uh, and you eventually get more of a relationship with them because of that. And so I'm sure that's going to happen with this alternative education company. You're going to work hard as head of ops, and he's going to say, I read this book, or this thing's cool, or I was looking at this event, um, or this guy's interesting. And you could cold email that guy that he talked about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And this is something that, you know, not to the extent that you just mentioned. I think there's scope for improvement for what I have, but this is one of my philosophies too. You know, I ask for advice, I take notes on everything that was, you know, told to me, and I take action, then I follow up. Hey, thank you for the advice. This is what I've done so far, and so on. So yeah, but you've given me a few ideas on how I could be doing it better. For example, the thought of you know, also pay attention to what they're not explicitly stating as advice, but just talking about in general is great. I think I should think about that as well. One thing I wanted to
Yeah.
tell you is that there's this company I work with called Agent of a Group. You said that you were interested in people making intentional living communities at one point in our conversation. So if that's something you're still interested in, you should talk to people from AG. They're very interesting folk. They work in the special economic zone space. Um, and they are very well connected to, you know, these really interesting communities all over the world. Some of them are business parks, but some others are, you know, more experimental. So um,
Will you send me a link?
sure, sure. I'm not sure how much pull my name has it. I was just like an employee there, but you could potentially
Yeah, yeah. Just so
say
I
that.
know. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I mean the thing that I always come back to, and what I'll leave you with because I got to head out,
Yeah,
is uh, if you do not quit and you get better, you are inevitable. Like whatever it is that you want to happen will, because the only two ways you fail are you don't get better or you quit.
yeah,
Um, so there often is not advice that people will give you explicitly, right? It's just going to end up being they say something in conversation and you take it and you actually do it. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Um, so you're already getting better as I see that. I would imagine you're also not a quitter. uh, so you're inevitable. Like whatever it is you want. What's going to make the difference is not like once you get to a certain playing field, like you're playing a game with a certain level of people, nobody's going to quit and everybody's going to get better. So what will make the difference is doing the extra things that people don't tell you directly to do. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
There we go. Um, thank you for reaching out.
Thank you for
Um,
your time.
feel free to follow up with whatever questions and things that you have. And maybe one day I'll see you in East Asia.
One day, hopefully. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really helpful. I have a ton of action items here, so thank you.
There you go. Take care.
All right, goodbye.